Thank the member for Canberra. Call the member for Forrest.
Deputy Speaker, I'm very pleased to stand and speak on this bill today. The Coalition, as we know, is supporting the bill, but we're offering some additional amendments in an effort to improve the bill itself, with the purpose of helping even more families, particularly those in rural and regional areas. And the amendments moved by the member for Moncrieff. We all understand the very great importance of childcare, but there are a couple of matters that really need to be addressed that aren't addressed by this bill that we see out in our communities, and they are both around the workforce, the current workforce, and also the issues around access, particularly if you're in a regional, rural or remote part of Australia. So yes, we certainly believe in choice, and we want parents, in whichever form, whether it's work, study, to be able to access care through formal or informal arrangements, whatever that is. But within what we've seen today, which is why we're seeking to make it better, there actually isn't a plan to address the current workforce shortage and the shortage pressures being faced by educators. And there are currently 7,200 vacancies in the sector right now, and there will be, given the measures in this bill, over $4.7 billion that's being invested here, that will of course create even greater demand, and so additional educators will be needed, and I understand that sits around another 9,000 people that will be required, extra people to work in this space in childcare. So this is really important because we need a plan that helps to address the access to care for so many, and so many struggling to find a place for their children. And there's also no plan for the thin markets that we see in rural, regional and remote areas. And there isn't within this package extra or 1 cent spent to create actually additional places and services that are so desperately needed. And we know that around 50% of there are childcare areas that are needing extra places are located in metropolitan locations, and 50% in rural, regional and remote locations. And we really need those extra places. We need those who need these places most desperately to be able to access them. Look, I wanted to speak a little bit as well about the Connected Beginnings program that we initiated as part of what we were doing in this space. The Connected Beginnings program provides access to Indigenous Australians living in regional and remote Australia, and established by us, there are currently 31 Connected Beginnings sites right across the country, and I was very impressed with the work being done in my ministerial role when I visited Tennant Creek, and I really want to acknowledge the work being done in Tennant Creek with the young people through the Connected Beginnings program. And we committed in 2021 an extra $81.8 million to expand this Connected Beginnings to 50 sites nationally. And when we know what's the great level of need out there, there's a great need for this program, in the same way that there is for the Community Childcare Fund, which is funding grants for services in disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. We do know, of course, that, as I said earlier, the access to additional staff is a really critical issue. And we want to make sure, I know through the Mitchell Institute research, I think, as I said, 7,200 shortage now, an extra 9,000 staff needed to meet the extra demands created by the actual measures in this bill. That's 16,200 extra workers needed for the existing childcare places that are on offer, not for any new places, for the existing ones. And there are no new places provided for within this particular bill or budget measure. We know that there are 3 children competing for every 1 place available right now. So 35% of the population actually miss out. And when I'm speaking of those who miss out, I want to talk about one of those places, which is Augusta in my electorate. And there's been a group of wonderful women that have been working for years, and I've been working with them since 2019, trying to secure a childcare service and facility to house it in Augusta. In 2021, they sought a premises, and in 2021, the Shire of Augusta-Margaret River actually voted to support the upgrade of the Augusta Rec Centre, which was not a lot happening at that time, and that was to provide the venue for the childcare to be able to operate in Augusta, in this tiny community. But in more recent times, the Shire voted against this project. And you can imagine what impact that had on these women who've worked so hard and are very engaged in their communities. I've actually suggested that, given that the Augusta-Margaret River Shire is unwilling to use council funding to upgrade the Augusta Rec Centre, we actually have another round of local roads and community infrastructure grants, and I'm really calling on the council to dedicate this funding to the upgrade for the families, the community and the businesses in Augusta. I mean, their actual purpose is to provide a nurturing, enriching childcare service in our rural location. That's how they describe themselves, and that's exactly what they want to do. And they want to increase the livability and inclusivity in Augusta, whether it's for the old, the young and the in-between. And so I can't think of a better purpose for that funding than for the Augusta Childcare Group. They've worked so hard and for so long. Their children deserve this opportunity, you know, and now when we look at the cost of fuel and the fact that their nearest childcare centre is actually in Margaret River, some distance away, and when you look at the both ways, it simply is not doable for so many of the mothers who are in Augusta. And they deserve access to childcare services in Augusta. And it is a lost opportunity for those women if they're not able to pursue whether it's a job, a career. It's a lost opportunity for them and their families and these beautiful little kids. And I want to see them have access to this service as soon as possible. And I really will keep working with them, and had secured an election commitment in that sense as well. There are so many wonderful childcare providers in my part of the world, as there are right around Australia, and the wonderful workers who are, and the staff members who just love what they do. And that's the one thing that we all notice when we walk into a childcare centre. The people who are working there love being there, and they do such a fantastic job with our children. And even in relation to Book Week, I've been into some of these centres to read my favourite book, and I've kept one specially for that purpose of the books I had when I was a child. And it's certainly one that entertains the young people, and the young children just love it, and they're very engaged in it, because with my farming background, it is about Dabbity Duck. And Dabbity Duck has all sorts of wonderful experiences, and not dissimilar to some of the wonderful ducks. I have a great fondness for the ducks that live in and around our farm and spend a lot of time on my lawn, and actually decided to set up a nest with many eggs and babies outside my front step. So this is a very personal issue for me when reading to these young people. But I go to places like Annie's Angels Play and Development Centre in Harvey. There's the Bluebird Busselton Centre. The Capel has a wonderful childcare centre, and here's one I don't think many would have. It's called Cowtown Calves Kids Childcare, and of course that is in the location of Kawarama, that also has those wonderful group of cows throughout the town that you see. There's Harvey Community Play and Learning Centre and Little Angels Early Learning Centre, the Margaret River Community Childcare, and one that I've had quite a bit to do with over the years, another small community that needs childcare for their families. That's the Treehouse Childcare Centre in Donnybrook. Again, really important to our local community. And each one of these is offering invaluable services to the community, but there's no doubt that they, in many parts, like Augusta, there is a demand and need for more childcare actual places, which is what we were seeking to do in the amendments we were providing while supporting this bill. But when we were in government, we basically almost doubled childcare investment to $11 billion in 2023 and locked in ongoing funding for preschools and kindergartens, making the biggest reforms in the early childhood education system for about 40-odd years. And more than 1.3 million children have access to the childcare subsidy from around 1 million families. And there's over 280,000 more children in early childhood education. And we abolished that annual cap on the childcare subsidy. So around 90% of families using childcare subsidy are currently eligible for between 50 to 85%. And since March of 2022, the subsidy of up to 95% for families with multiple children in early childhood education at once, so increasing that workforce participation and cheaper access to care. So that targeted extra support in March of this year made a real difference, and childcare costs came down by 4.6% in the year to June 2022. As well, we saw women's workforce participation reach record highs at 62.3%, and it was 58.7% when Labor left office. So, Deputy Speaker, I am very pleased to support the bill, but also the amendments that we have proposed. And I will again go back to the fact that in so many areas around Australia, rural, regional, those smaller communities where there are either no childcare places available or no, as we see in Augusta, no childcare at all available in that community, and also where we don't have the two things that I've spoken about that are the focus of the amendments around both access and staff numbers. And both of those issues are real issues, particularly in regional and remote parts of Australia in particular. It is a huge challenge. We are facing real challenges around workforce in general, and this particular sector is no different. So we would really like to see the government, in its funding of this bill and in the funding of childcare, address those two really critical issues. Access, which is really the first thing for so many of us who live in rural and regional areas. Access is the most important thing that's not there. So that's the first thing, and that 35% of kids who can't get childcare at all, and there are so many families that sit in that bracket. The Augusta group is but one that I've been able to talk about today. So I am supportive of both the bill, but also I want to underline the importance of the amendments by the Shadow Minister, because what we all want to see, I think, is greater access to childcare in the locations where it's needed, like Augusta and like so many other small communities that I'm sure we're going to hear about and here in this discussion and in this debate, that we need access to more childcare places. And the other worry I think all of us have, if we're being really honest, is about the access to the actual staffing that will be needed, the extra staffing that will be needed to support the measures in this bill and for ongoing services. So thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for that